Chapter 1: Uninvited Visitor. Jack Riley was 36 when an Iraqi improvised explosive device decided that his eyes had enjoyed the surrounding world for too long and sent him on a forced leave from the army. His wife Sophia, a 34-year-old Spanish teacher for immigrants, slowly evolved from a loving spouse into an irritable warden with chronic fatigue syndrome. And then, after 8 months of torment, she acquired a Brazilian lover named Rafael, whom she masterfully hid from her blind husband until Grandpa Harvey burst into their theater of the absurd. A 75-year-old Iraq War veteran, extracted from a nursing home like an ancient artifact from a museum storage facility. No one except Harvey himself suspected that his dementia was a military ruse perfected in the sands of Fallujah, far more insidious than any tactical maneuver from the Pentagon. Outside, the October evening was dying, flooding the living room with that special melancholic light that Jack Riley could now only imagine, like a distant relative known only through old photographs. He sat in an armchair acquired before the event, as the explosion was called in their house, mechanically stroking the armrest as if it were a faithful dog that had waited for its master. The chair remembered a different Jack, tanned, with such a confident gait that the ground beneath his feet seemed to thank him for the opportunity to support him. Now his fingers, like 10 little soldiers who had lost their commander, were simply searching for some constant in a world that had turned into a black hole. Sophia stood by the window, arms crossed over her chest like a general dissatisfied with the course of a battle, watching as the social worker, Miss Flowers, a name completely incongruous with her dryness and prickliness, helped an elderly man clamber out of the nursing home's car. Splendid asterisk, she thought with a sour expression, asterisk another dependent in this house of sorrow. Her every movement betrayed fatigue, not that banal physical fatigue, but an existential exhaustion of the soul that accumulates like radiation and eventually leads to a mutation of everything that was once human. For 8 months, she had been her husband's GPS navigator, audiobook, and personal Siri. For 8 months, she had put her life on a shelf like a library book that no one asks for. And now this second one. He is completely unbearable. Miss Flower's voice sounded as if she were apologizing for bringing not a goldfish, but a crocodile into the house. The last straw was last week's incident. Mr. Harvey constructed an entire complex of traps in the west wing of the nursing home. Clotheslines, tin cans with marbles inside, homemade tripwires made of dental floss. Mrs. Holliday, our oldest resident, now sports a purple cast on her wrist and a story that no one wants to listen to during morning bingo. Harvey, sitting in his wheelchair like a captain on the bridge of a sinking ship, suddenly raised his head. His faded eyes, resembling 2 overexposed photographs, seemed to look through the walls of the house with such penetration that an X-ray machine would have envied. Terrorists, he unexpectedly roared with a force that made the window panes tremble. They're hiding in the ventilation. I can hear them crawling through the pipes. Sophia flinched as if someone had replaced her spine with an electric wire and turned on the current. Good Lord, asterisk, she thought wistfully, asterisk now there will be 2 invalids in the house, one who can't see reality with his eyes, the other with his brain. Grandpa served in Iraq, Jack quietly explained, turning his head with the precision of a metronome toward the shout. He was in a storm unit. Those are special divisions that. I know what storm units are. Sophia cut him off with such irritation that her words could have cut glass. I saw a report on the Discovery Channel. They cleared houses in search of terrorists. A quarter of them came home in sealed zinc boxes. Harvey, who seemed not to hear their conversation, although in reality he was absorbing every word like blotting paper, began humming Fortunate Son by Creedence Clearwater Revival. His fingers, resembling the roots of an ancient oak, or pretending to be such, tapped out the rhythm on the wheelchair's armrest with the precision of a virtuoso drummer. Miss Flowers extracted a stack of papers from her briefcase with the air of a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat. "You need to sign the custody documents. And here's a list of his medications. Sedatives prescribed in quantities capable of putting down a small herd of rhinoceroses. Sleeping pills that would make even a dead man sleep twice. Blood pressure tablets." She hesitated, like a schoolgirl before a strict teacher. "Though he rarely takes them. Claims that in the desert you can't trust anyone, not even your own shadow." While Sophia signed the papers, each signature accompanied by a heavy sigh worthy of Atlas holding up the celestial sphere, Jack listened to his grandfather's singing. Something had changed in that hoarse voice, something elusive, like the scent of danger, as if the old man wasn't just singing, but sending a coded message to an invisible recipient. In those rare moments when Harvey had visited them before the event, he never sang, except perhaps the national anthem, and even then only on Independence Day after 5 bottles of beer. Harvey's old army backpack plopped down in the corner of the living room with a sound as if something alive inside was trying to escape. From its numerous pockets, resembling zoo cages, protruded some ropes, a weathered compass, and the corner of a yellowed photograph, as if old memories were trying to escape from their owner. Sophia looked at this backpack as if it were a package marked biohazard. In a sense, it was. "Welcome to my last battle," Harvey contemplated, studying the house through cunningly narrowed eyelids. "Only this time the enemy isn't hiding in bunkers. He will come himself, confident in his impunity, like a tourist in a zoo unaware that the tiger's cage is open." When Miss Flowers finally took her leave, not without relief, as if leaving a quarantine zone, a silence fell over the house so dense that it could be sliced and served as an appetizer. Sophia automatically headed for the kitchen. Cooking dinner was the safest way to avoid conversation and pretend, at least for a while, that everything was normal. The sound of the microwave, resembling the working radar of a small airport, broke the silence, and Harvey reacted with the speed of an electric shock. "Air raid!" His cry was filled with such authentic horror that even Sophia momentarily felt herself at the epicenter of a bombing. "Jackie, to the floor. They're bombing our position. Hell with vertical takeoff is about to begin." The old man rolled out of his wheelchair with the grace and agility of a Cirque du Soleil acrobat, too nimbly for a person of his age, build, and presumed arthritis. His hand darted toward his grandson with the precision of a heat-seeking missile, and within a fraction of a second, they were both under the massive dining table, which was clearly not designed for such use. "Grandpa, what the hell?" Jack began, but Harvey pressed a finger to his lips with the force of a censor blacking out state secrets. "SHH," he hissed like an overheated radiator. "The second pass is coming. They always attack twice. It's like with popcorn in the microwave, you always have to wait until there are 5 seconds between pops." And then something as unexpected as snow in the Sahara Desert happened. Jack Riley, a man who hadn't smiled since Asterisk that very day in Iraq, suddenly began to laugh. It wasn't the hysterical laughter of a man on the verge of a nervous breakdown or a forced chuckle out of politeness, but that genuine belly laugh that originates somewhere around the solar plexus and rises upward, washing away all accumulated bitterness like an ocean wave erasing inscriptions on sand. Sophia froze in the kitchen doorway, not knowing whether to cry or join this surrealistic moment. Over the past months, she had almost forgotten how her husband's laughter sounded. This sound seemed as distant to her as the call signs of Apollo 11. And now this demented old man. In the evening, when everyone had dispersed to their rooms like soldiers to their trenches, Harvey locked his bedroom door and methodically, with the precision of a surgeon performing open-heart surgery, began to lay out the contents of his backpack. His movements were no longer those of a crazy old man. Each gesture was honed and measured, like a watchmaker working with a mechanism of rare value. A stack of old photographs, his platoon of stormtroopers, his wife Martha, may she rest in peace, little Jackie in his father's arms, looking as if he had just been pulled out of a washing machine, An army compass that had saved his life in the sands of Fallujah more times than a cat has lives. A coil of sturdy climbing rope, not that cheap synthetic trash sold in supermarkets for gift wrapping, but real rope, capable of supporting the weight of an adult bison. And most importantly, a tattered notebook with records of traps for insurgents that they had set up in urban areas. "Sorry, Martha," he whispered, looking at his wife's photograph with an expression that men wear when they are about to do something their other half would definitely not approve of. "But our boy seems to have gotten himself into a bigger mess than when he stuck his head between the fence posts at age 6. And the old tricks, they still work, like vintage Jack Daniels." Harvey approached the window. The full moon bathed the backyard in silvery light, turning the tall grass into a miniature sea of molten silver. The perfect place for what he had in mind, as if nature itself had decided to participate in his performance. The old soldier grinned, the same smile that Iraqi insurgents saw last before realizing their life path had come to a sudden and unpleasant end. Chapter 2: Spanish Lessons. When Raphael first crossed the threshold of the Rileys' house with the air of a cat that had found an unlocked cream factory, Harvey was just completing his daily perimeter check. A captivating activity consisting of crawling on all fours along the living room walls with a magnifying glass in hand, and an expression on his face as if he were diffusing Buckingham Palace. In the old man's opinion, the enemy could seep into the house through any crack, even if it was smaller than the eye of a needle. And the fact that the neighbor's cat regularly marked the corner of the house only confirmed his suspicions, giving them the status of irrefutable evidence. "This cat is clearly an Iranian spy working undercover," Harvey announced at breakfast with the seriousness of a congressional speaker. "I've figured him out, like the crispy crust on an apple pie. Everyone thinks he's just marking territory, but he's actually transmitting encoded messages to the enemy. Yesterday I deciphered one. It said, 'Sell Manhattan back to the Indians, but this time don't take beads, take bitcoins.'" Their romance had begun 2 months earlier in the cozy cafe Carmel Fever, where Sophia gave Spanish lessons to Brazilian students studying at the local university. Raphael was 6 years younger than her, and this age difference only added spice to their relationship, like a pinch of chili pepper in chocolate ice cream. First, there were innocent touches during lessons, like two teenagers in a school library, then casual meetings after classes, and then passionate dates at the Pink Flamingo Motel on the outskirts of town, where the desk clerk was deaf in both ears and blind in both eyes, especially after receiving a bill with Ulysses S. Grant's portrait. But soon, these stolen hours were not enough. It was Sophia who suggested what seemed absolute madness even to her: conducting lessons right at her home. The very thought that they would be making love in the next room from her blind husband ignited in them a fire that could have competed with a blast furnace. "Oh, do we have guests?" Harvey raised his head when Sophia opened the front door. "Just a minute, I'm just finishing my daily report to the Joint Chiefs. Comrade Cat sneezed exactly 4 times in the northeastern direction this morning. That's a clear signal to the submarines from Venezuela that Operation Wet Tail is entering its active phase." He sat before an old toaster, using it as a radio with the seriousness of a spaceport dispatcher. "Alpha 6 calling base. I repeat, the spy cat has activated and is now drinking milk from the neighboring pensioner's bowl. Reinforcements required and 3 packs of cat treats for counterintelligence. Toaster standing by, over." Raphael froze in the doorway, not knowing whether to laugh or run to the nearest consulate for political asylum. Sophia, with a casual gesture adjusting her hair, that same gesture which had already entered their secret love code as a signal for "Today I'm not wearing underwear," introduced. "This is Raphael, my new student from Brazil. Will be studying here at home. Raph, this is my husband's grandfather. Sergeant Harvey Riley, 1st Platoon of Fallujah Stormtroopers." The old man jumped to attention with such speed that his joints made a sound reminiscent of a salute of party poppers. 3 years in the sandbox, 23 confirmed. O.H. Lord, a drone. He crashed to the floor and began shooting at the ceiling fan, using a banana as an improvised pistol. Everybody down. It's a terrorist drone disguised as a household appliance. Jack, hearing the commotion exceeding the bounds of normal household chaos, emerged from his room with the expression of a man accustomed to life's absurdity. "Grandpa, are you fighting with the fan again? Last time you declared it a Shaheed suicide bomber." "That's not a fan, my blind friend. It's the latest Iranian development, a stealth drone disguised as a household appliance. I figured it out when I noticed the blades rotating clockwise, typical capitalist propaganda of success. Real fans should rotate against the system." "Raf will be coming 3 times a week," said Sophia, trying to hide her smile like one hides a secret stash from a spouse. "We decided that studying at home is more effective." "And I know why," Harvey suddenly declared with the insight of a clairvoyant. "Because at home, there's a secret weapon against Brazilian spies, my signature blueberry pie with a secret ingredient. Even General Perez ran faster than his shadow from it, though afterwards he had a stomach upset that military historians classified as a tactical retreat from the toilet." Raphael and Sophia exchanged glances in which relief could be read. The old man was so out of his mind that they had nothing to fear. He might notice an elephant in the living room, but would decide it was a secret Pentagon weapon. "Nice to meet you." Jack extended his hand toward the sound of footsteps with radar precision. Raphael shook it, trying not to look at the dark glasses of the former Special Forces soldier, behind which, he imagined, were not eyes but 2 black wells. "We'll be studying in the office," Sophia announced in the tone of a tour guide. "Grandpa, maybe you could go to your room. You have a scheduled daily communication session with, what's it called? The space satellite." Of course, of course." Harvey nodded happily with the enthusiasm of a child offered ice cream. "But first I'll check if the enemy has mined my favorite chair. Yesterday it seemed suspiciously soft to me. Either the springs have settled, or a group of Iranian commandos the size of hamsters is hiding there." Settled in his armchair, the old man began his daily performance, snoring with such artistic whistling that any opera tenor would envy, occasionally interrupted by exclamations like, "No, Captain, this scorpion is not for the salad," or "Who replaced the bullets in my rifle with jelly beans?" Sophia and Raphael sat at the desk in the office so close to each other that not even a sheet of paper could slip between them. Their fingers, accidentally, intertwined when they supposedly reached for the textbook, with such regularity that it could be used to calibrate Swiss watches. "Te Quiro," Raphael pronounced, looking her straight in the eyes with the intensity of a laser beam. "Almost correct," whispered Sophia with a breath that made Raphael's knees weak, "but softer, more guttural." "Flank attack," Harvey suddenly roared, jumping up in his chair as if stung. "Enemy at 3 o'clock. No, at 4 o'clock. Ah, damn it, who replaced all the hands on the clocks with hours from a different time zone?" He pulled a banana from his robe pocket and began talking into it like a news anchor in a live broadcast. "All posts. We have an orange code. I repeat, orange code. And by the way, very juicy and nutritious. Just had it for breakfast with yogurt." In the evening, after overhearing Sophia's phone conversation with Raphael, which was so explicit that even the telephone wires blushed, Harvey returned to his room and took out a coil of climbing rope from his backpack, stroking it like a beloved cat. "Sorry, old girl," he whispered, looking at his wife's photograph, which gazed at him with the expression of someone suspecting something amiss. "But it seems a real urban warfare is about to begin in this house, and this time my main ally is not a tactical airstrike, but well-staged senile dementia." He unfolded a map of the house, marked with red crosses like a pirate treasure map. In the corner was a note, "Operation Plan Toast and Justice," code name invented by the toaster, our chief strategist and part-time kitchen appliance philosopher. After all, as his old sergeant used to say, if you want to catch a snake, Think like a snake. And in this business, Harvey had no equal since Fallujah, especially when he had his trusty toaster radio man, the double-agent cat, and the fan working undercover on his side. Chapter 3: Security Perimeter. Attention, all posts. Harvey's voice echoed through the house like a sale announcement in a shopping mall. We begin Operation Ringing Terror, code name invented by Private Toaster, who is responsible for creative nomming and slogans for advertising campaigns. It was 7 in the morning, a time when most normal people are still dreaming about flying or winning the lottery, and the old man was already commanding a parade with enough energy to power a small power station. This time his army consisted of a dozen bells purchased from the pet store, tailed Happiness, a solid coil of fishing line capable of holding a shark, and an impressive collection of tin cans that he had begged from neighbors for 3 weeks, using such heartbreaking stories that they cried while giving him empty pea cans. "Grandpa, what are you doing at such an early hour?" Jack, awakened by noise that could compete with a steam locomotive siren, came downstairs, habitually orienting himself along the walls like a mountaineer in fog. "Setting up a defense perimeter, son." Harvey was just securing the first bell above the kitchen door with the precision of a surgeon operating on a president. "You see, in Iraq we use such a system. Oh, sorry, of course, you don't see, but soon you'll hear. Each bell will have its unique ring like a fingerprint. This one, for example, I've named Morning Coffee with a Taste of Paranoia. And the one that will be at the back door, Midnight Serenade for Saddam Hussein, performed on an out-of tune balalaika." Jack couldn't suppress a smile that stretched his lips like a rubber band. "And why do we need this symphony for a house with bells?" "Because yesterday the cat transmitted a secret cipher to the pigeons. I saw with my own eyes how he meowed in Morse code. 3 short, 2 long, 3 prolonged burps after eating the neighbor's fish." Harvey continued to chatter like a magpie that had found shiny foil, but his eyes carefully watched how Jack cautiously moved along the corridor, listening to the bell rings. With each step, his grandson's movements became more confident. He was beginning to create a sound map of the house in his head, like a bat navigating by echolocation. By noon, the security system was fully installed and looked as if the house was preparing for an invasion of invisible burglars or for filming Home Alone, retirement version. Bells hung on every door like Christmas decorations in a store. Tripwires with jingle bells crossed the corridors, turning them into a musical labyrinth. And in the yard, strategically placed tin cans were disguised with a thin layer of earth with such artistry that even a sapper with 30 years of experience wouldn't have noticed them. "Comrade Cat," Harvey yelled into the garden through the window with the intensity of an opera singer. "Try to get through my perimeter now. No feline intelligence will slip through undetected, even if it wears slippers and moves on tiptoe." The neighbors had already gotten used to the antics of the crazy veteran and just shook their heads, suspecting that the government was conducting some strange experiment to integrate the insane into society. Mrs. Johnson from the house across the street had even begun keeping a diary of his most colorful statements. "Today, old man, Harvey accused my hydrangea of espionage for North Korea," she recorded that day with the pedantry of a naturalist observing a rare species. "Claimed that purple flowers are a clear sign of subversive activities aimed at destabilizing American gardening traditions." That same evening, Raphael came for another lesson, reeking of cologne like a teenager before his first date. Sophia met him at the door, and they exchanged meaningful glances in which such frank passion could be read that even the wallpaper on the walls seemed to blush. "Intruder in the perimeter," Harvey shouted from his observation post in the armchair with such enthusiasm as if he had won the lottery. "The spy cat has brought REINFORCMENTS. Activate protocol, wet paw." "It's just Raph, Grandpa," sighed Sophia with such patience usually shown to children who believe in Santa Claus. "Remember, my student from Brazil." Ah, yes, yes. Harvey pretended to calm down but continued to mutter under his breath like a kettle before boiling. Of course, of course. Student. Right, I remember. In 2000, we also had a student. Later it turned out he had learned more of our secret codes than Spanish verbs. Jack sat in the living room, listening to music with headphones, or skillfully pretending to listen, like Mozart's guitar. Harvey noticed how his fingers tapped out the rhythm on the armchair's armrest perfectly in time with the bells ringing when Sophia and Raphael passed by with the air of teenagers sneaking into an adult party. The lovers settled at the table, supposedly immersed in the Spanish textbook with the intensity of students before an exam. But their hands under the table intertwined more and more frequently, like vines in a tropical forest, and their laughter became more playful and explicit. They were so engrossed in each other that they didn't notice how Jack removed his headphones and began to listen with the concentration of a submarine detecting enemy ships. "I'll get some water," said Sophia, rising. Raphael followed her to the kitchen as if magnetized. "Time to check the system," Harvey suddenly announced and began waving his arms, portraying a mad conductor at a concert of insanity. "Maestro Toaster, begin the overture. Violins enter on the count of 3. He accidentally hit one of the tripwires, and a whole symphony of bells swept through the house that would have made Vivaldi blush with envy. At that moment, muffled laughter and the sound of falling dishes came from the kitchen. The lovers were clearly caught off guard in a moment of passionate kissing or something more intimate, for which the kitchen table was hardly the best place. "Ah, what beautiful music!" Harvey exulted with the enthusiasm of a critic at a premiere. "A true symphony of alarm. It's only a pity we don't have percussion for the final chord. Though wait a minute, I think something just crashed with a bang in the kitchen." Late in the evening, when the house had quieted like a school after classes, Harvey slipped out into the yard with a shovel, resembling a grave robber who had just found a treasure map. It was time to begin the main part of his plan, the one that even the toaster had not been informed about for reasons of secrecy. Under the light of the full moon, he began digging a pit, exactly like those that had helped his unit catch insurgents in the suburbs of Fallujah. "Here's your Spanish lesson," he muttered, wielding the shovel with the energy of a man 3 times younger. "Now we'll learn a new word. Trap in Spanish sounds like trampa, but the result is always the same. Someone ends up in a deep hole." Inside the house, Jack carefully removed his dark glasses and brought his hand to his eyes, like a man trying to see something in the fog. In complete darkness, he could distinguish the faint glow of a street lamp breaking through the curtains, like the first rays after a long polar night. This was the first light he had seen in the past 8 months. But for now, he kept this discovery to himself. Something told him that his grandfather's paranoia had a foundation more solid than the concrete foundation of a skyscraper. Meanwhile, Harvey continued digging, humming. "These boots are made for walking," with a falseness capable of scaring away even deaf neighbors, and periodically giving orders to an imaginary platoon with the seriousness of a general planning the landing in Normandy. Private shovel deeper. Sergeant Rake, camouflage the position with leaves and branches. Corporal Toaster, transmit to base the code, warm pit ready to receive guests. And yes, I know that you physically cannot leave the socket in the kitchen, but in wartime, one must show flexibility of thinking and initiative. The neighbor's cat watched this scene from the fence, resembling a small fluffy judge, and Harvey could have sworn that in its yellow eyes flashed approval and even respect. "What, comrade cat, switching to the side of law and justice? Right decision. We have canned tuna available and a woolen sock for winter nights. And what do these pigeons have? Just bread crumbs and socialist ideas that won't keep you warm in frost." Chapter 4: Suspicions. Raphael no longer jumped to the ceiling when Harvey started his morning radio broadcasts, reminiscent of a mix of frontline reports and weather forecasts for planet Mars. Moreover, the Brazilian student even began to find a peculiar charm in them, like watching a movie that's so bad it becomes a virtue. Attention, ON Air Radio, Free Toaster and Company. The old man broadcast into his banana microphone with the solidity of a central television announcer. Incident report for the past 24 hours. The agent cat has recruited 2 pigeons, 1 squirrel, and a suspicious magpie who probably works for British intelligence. The enemy is building up manpower and will soon move to open confrontation. "Good morning, Mr. Riley," Raphael greeted, slipping into the kitchen with the grace and confidence of a man feeling at home. He no longer knocked on the door, just entered, as if he had his own copy of the keys, which was possibly true. "Ah, our young friend from the land of carnivals and coffee." Harvey squinted like a sniper spotting a target. "You're here bright and early today. The lesson is scheduled for 3 in the afternoon if my old brain can still retain information longer than a colander holds water." "Sophia asked me to come early." Raphael smiled with a charm that could melt a glacier. "She wanted to check my homework before the lessons begin." "Of course, asterisk," thought Harvey with a sour expression, especially the part that's performed in a horizontal position without a pencil and notebook. Over the past weeks, the lovers had become surprisingly careless, like children playing with matches near a gas station. They no longer hid in corners but openly flirted right in front of blind Jack, as if his disability had deprived him not only of sight but of all other senses as well. Their lessons had turned into some perverted game of cat and mouse. The closer they were to exposure, the more it excited them, like the risk of being caught titillates professional thieves. "You know, I also had a romance with a Brazilian woman in my youth," Harvey suddenly said, adjusting his invariable banana microphone as if it were a tie before an important meeting. "In Basra, though it later turned out she was working for Iraqi intelligence. Tried to extract our secrets through the bed, can you imagine? A classic case of espionage through sweat glands." Raphael choked on his coffee, spattering his snow-white shirt. Harvey patted him on the back with fatherly care and such force that the Brazilian nearly lost his fillings. "Be careful, young man. Coffee is a treacherous drink, especially when you drink it. Not in the right position. Vertical is safer than horizontal if you understand what I mean." At that moment, Sophia floated into the kitchen in a light home robe that hinted at what was underneath rather than concealing it. Her hair was appetizingly disheveled, and on her neck was a fresh hickey the size of a small strawberry, which she hadn't even bothered to conceal with foundation or a scarf. "Oh, Raph, you're already here." She approached the refrigerator, accidentally brushing against his hip with such precision that would have done credit to a professional billiards player. "Attention all SCRVICES," Harvey began shouting again. "Violation of personal space protocol in sector kitchen. Comrade Toaster, record the exact time and coordinates for the report to headquarters." "Grandpa, for heaven's sake," Sophia sighed with an expression of deep patience usually shown in advertisements for sedatives. "We're just going to study Spanish language." Of course," the old man nodded with the enthusiasm of a bobblehead doll. "Only in Basra, we were also just studying investigations, and then boom, half of our operation plans ended up in enemy hands. The tongue can lead you to Baghdad, especially if that tongue is too long and not only in the mouth." He hobbled to his armchair in the living room, muttering something about hormonal intelligence and sexual diversions of the century. But his hearing, sharpened by years of war, caught every rustle, every stifled moan coming from the kitchen, as if they were radio transmissions from enemy forces. Jack came down half an hour later, when the lovers had already moved to the office for studying complex verb forms. His movements had become noticeably more confident. He no longer clung to the walls like a mountaineer to a rock, but confidently bypassed all the tripwires with bells that Harvey had hung up, as if he had long studied the map of the minefield. "Son," the old man exclaimed joyfully, "just in time for the morning briefing. I'm preparing a most important report for Joint Command about suspicious activity in our house. Can you imagine? Someone ate all the cookies that I strategically placed for monitoring the enemy. 3 chocolate, 2 oatmeal, and 1 cranberry, all disappeared without a trace. You ate them, Grandpa, Jack smiled, sitting in the armchair opposite. Last night, said the cookies might be recruited by an international network of terrorist confectioners. Ah, right. Harvey slapped his forehead with such force that he could have stunned a mosquito if it had the imprudence to land there. Had to resort to extreme measures, destroyed the evidence. I mean cookies, by the method of gastronomic neutralization. At that moment, the sound of a falling book and muffled laughter, more like a moan of pleasure, came from the office. Harvey noticed how Jack's fingers clenched on the armrest of the chair with such force that his knuckles turned white as first snow. "What's going on in there?" asked the grandson, and in his voice sounded steel that even a deliberately calm tone could not mask. "Ah, it's our lovebirds. I mean students of language sciences studying," Harvey drawled meaningfully. "Very intensive training program, especially in the area of, practical application of the tongue in all its positions. That is, positions in the sentence." He deliberately said this loud enough for the lovers to hear, but they seemed so engrossed in their lesson that they wouldn't have noticed even a fire alarm, unless it doused them with cold water at the most inopportune moment. In the evening, when Raphael finally departed, after a particularly productive session during which the bookshelf in Sophia's office swayed threateningly, Harvey went to check his main trap. The pit was almost ready, perfect depth, perfect slope of the walls, perfect camouflage of branches and leaves, as if it were not a homemade trap but a work of landscape art. "What do you think, furry comrade?" he addressed the cat, which was observing his work from the fence with the air of a film critic at a failed premiere. "Should we conduct test trials? You'll play the role of an enemy scout, and I'll demonstrate the effectiveness of our anti-personnel system." The cat disdainfully snorted and turned away, showing by its entire demeanor that its services cost more than a pensioner could offer. "Ah, so that's how it is," Harvey grinned. All right, I get the hint. You're an independent contractor, working for your personal feline agency. You choose your own clients and take payment in fish, not money." Later that evening, he eavesdropped on Sophia's phone conversation. She didn't even try to speak quietly, so accustomed to the sense of security provided by her husband's blindness and her father-in-law's supposed insanity that she behaved with the caution of an elephant in a china shop. "Yes, darling, tomorrow as usual. You know this turns me on more and more each time, when he sits next to us with headphones on and we— Yes, I know it's terrible, but isn't that the whole point? Forbidden fruit is always sweet, even if it's an avocado." Harvey shook his head with the air of a professor disappointed in the work of a once promising student. He had seen this in Iraq, how self-confidence leads to defeat faster than a faulty rifle. The enemy becomes careless, loses vigilance, begins to make mistakes that ultimately lead to his corpse decorating a roadside. He spread out on his bed his improvised map of the house, where red crosses marked all the points of no return, places where the lovers allowed themselves special liberties, as if it were a treasure map in reverse. Red crosses were becoming more numerous, like pockmarks on the face of a sick person. "Well," he muttered, looking out the window at his camouflaged pit, resembling a trap for a dinosaur. "As my old sergeant used to say, the deeper the pit, the louder the echo of the fall. And you and I, my dear Fallujah friend, still have a couple of days to become a perfect factory for producing broken limbs and shattered hopes." Chapter 5: The Trap. A storm was approaching the city with the inevitability of a tax notice, slowly but with absolute certainty that no one would escape its attention. Harvey stood at the window, watching how heavy clouds, resembling squadrons of bombers, covered the sky. An old plastic bucket at his feet exuded an aroma that delicate people would call specific, and everyone else, the stink of stale urine. "Comrade Toaster," he whispered to his kitchen confidant with the air of a conspirator, "today we will conduct Operation Wet Revenge. And no, it's not a play on words. Although," he looked at the bucket and grinned with the air of a man appreciating his own joke. For the past week, Harvey had demonstratively refused to use the toilet, claiming that, in Iraq, "I got used to urinating in a bucket in the bunker, because there could always be snipers ready to shoot off anything that sticks out above." Sophia was so furious she could have boiled a kettle with a single glance, but she acquiesced. Another quirk of the senile old man, easier to tolerate than to fight. Who knew it was part of a strategic plan worthy of Napoleon? Jack sat in the living room, without headphones and without dark glasses, which now lay on the table beside him like a discarded mask. His eyes, not yet fully recovered, could distinguish light and shadows, contours of objects and silhouettes of people, like watching a black and white film through not very clean glass. Through the panoramic windows, he could see the first lightning flashes cutting through the sky like the welding tools of giants. "Grandpa," he called quietly, "you were right, all this time, like in the desert when you sense an ambush but can't see the enemy." Harvey stopped pretending to be a crazy veteran with hallucinations. His voice became as hard as in those days when he commanded an assault group in the streets of Fallujah. "How long have you known?" "I saw them kissing in the kitchen a week ago. They thought I was sleeping like the dead." Jack clenched his fists. "And before that, I just didn't want to believe it, attributed everything to paranoia. Mine, yours, maybe hoped it was just a nightmare I'd wake up from." "In Fallujah," Harvey spoke slowly, as if reading lines from a military textbook, "we learned one simple truth. Paranoia isn't a mental disorder. It's a survival mechanism for those who understand the true nature of the world." The first raindrops pattered on the roof like the impatient fingers of a drummer. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Sophia was preparing for her lover's arrival, decorating the battlefield with aromatic candles and silk sheets. She didn't even try to be quiet, so accustomed to her husband's blindness and her father-in-law's insanity that she felt invisible, like children closing their eyes in a game of hide-and-seek. "Today?" asked Jack, and in his voice sounded the determination of a special forces soldier before an assault. Harvey nodded, gripping the bucket tighter, like an ancient warrior his shield. "Today. Are you ready for the unpleasant truth that will be displayed before you in all its glory?" "Ready as I'll never be." The old man slowly descended to the basement, as if performing a secret ritual. The electrical panel flickered in the semi-darkness with red-green indicators like the eyes of predators lurking in the dark. For a moment, Harvey allowed himself one last dramatic pause. "Farewell, Comrade Toaster. You were the best soldier of all kitchen appliances I ever had the honor to serve with," whispered Harvey, looking at the faithful comrade in arms he had specially brought to the basement for the final act of the drama. "It's time for your last mission. Operation Short Path to Darkness begins on my command." He placed the toaster on the floor near the electrical panel, plugged it in, and saluted with the solemnity worthy of a national hero's funeral. "Serving with you has been an honor for me, old friend. You're a brave soldier, a loyal comrade, and an excellent bread toaster. Your sacrifice will not be forgotten. You'll be included in history textbooks as the first toaster to commit an act of self-sacrifice in the name of family values." And then with one decisive movement, he tipped the basin of urine right onto the working toaster. There was a loud hiss, sparks flew like at an 80s disco, and "Comrade Toaster, you're a real hero," Harvey had time to whisper before the house plunged into darkness like an ocean vessel at depth. The short circuit covered the house with an impenetrable veil of darkness, like a perfect black blanket. In the bedroom upstairs, Raphael sharply pulled away from Sophia, with whom they had been indulging in passion with the enthusiasm of rabbits in breeding season, not even bothering to close the door. Whom did they have to fear in this fortress of impunity? The blind husband downstairs, the senile old man muttering something to his imaginary platoon. "Don't worry," whispered Sophia, running her hand over his bare chest. "Just the fuses. This happens during storms. I'll go check." "I apologize for the technical difficulties," came Harvey's voice from below, resembling an announcement in the subway. "A small diversion in the best traditions of the Iraq War. Temporary difficulties." That was the last time they heard the old man's joking tone. Subsequent events unfolded like in a horror movie, but without special effects, just pure, concentrated fear. "I'll check myself." Raphael began to dress, fumbling with his trousers like a recruit with parachute straps. "I'll also bring candles from the kitchen. I saw them in the drawer." In pitch darkness, he slowly descended the stairs, holding onto the railing like a drowning man to a life preserver. The thunder outside rumbled closer and closer, as if artillery was approaching their positions, and in the next lightning flash, he saw something that made his heart somersault. Jack stood at the foot of the stairs like the statue of the commander, without dark glasses, and his eyes were looking straight at Raphael, like two searchlights illuminating a criminal during an escape. "You know," the Special Forces soldier's voice was calm, frighteningly calm, like the calm before a storm. "When you lose one sense, the others become supernaturally acute. I heard your every breath, every stifled moan, every creak of the bed above my head, every whisper you exchanged, thinking I was in my world of darkness." Raphael backed up the stairs like a crab sensing an approaching seagull. "Jack, listen. I can explain everything." "Explain." In Jack's laughter there wasn't a drop of joy, only the concentrated bitterness of black coffee without sugar. "What exactly? How you slept with my wife while I sat with headphones on like an idiot. How you laughed at a blind cripple, turning my tragedy into a backdrop for your entertainment. Or perhaps," he took a step forward, "you'll explain why you decided you could leave here with intact limbs." A new flash of lightning illuminated the face of the former Special Forces soldier, and Raphael saw in it what Iraqi militants saw in the last seconds of their lives: the cold, dispassionate determination of a man for whom killing is just another task on a day's to-do list. He turned and ran like an Olympic sprinter hearing the starting pistol. The first tripwire caught him on the second floor. The bells rang a funeral toll, as if singing a requiem for his future. He got tangled in the fishing line, crashed to the floor, splitting his chin, but immediately jumped up like a rubber ball and darted toward the service staircase. "Run," Jack's voice echoed in the darkness like in a cave. "Run like your ancestors ran from my grandfather in the streets of Fallujah. Feel what it's like to be prey." Raphael burst into the kitchen, knocking over a chair with a crash that seemed especially ominous in the darkness. He was shaking with fear and understanding. All this month they had been making fun of a crazy old man who had actually been methodically preparing a trap for him, like a spider weaving a web for a careless fly. "Jack, I beg you," came Sophia's cry from above, more like the howl of a wounded animal. "Don't do this, please." "Shut up." Her husband barked with such fury that the walls seemed to tremble from the sound. Raphael reached the back door, but the handle resisted his sweaty fingers as if enchanted. Locked tight. He darted to the window, getting tangled in the ropes hung by Harvey, stumbling over some cans scattered on the floor. Each ring, each crash revealed his position with the accuracy of a GPS navigator. "How do you like it in the dark?" Jack's voice sounded closer and closer like an approaching train. "Unfamiliar, right? When you don't know what's a step away from you, when each sound could mean either salvation or the end. Welcome to my world, friend." Finally, Raphael managed to open the window with such a crack as if he were breaking down a door. He tumbled outside into the pouring rain, more like a waterfall, sliding down the wet cornice. Lightning illuminated the backyard for a moment, and he saw Harvey standing on the porch with a cane in his hands, like a sentry at the gates of hell. The old man gave him a military salute, a gesture in which there was nothing comical, only a cold statement: "Checkmate." "Son of a bitch," Raphael yelled with the desperation of a man falling from a skyscraper when the ground gave way beneath his feet as if it were a living creature. He crashed into a perfectly camouflaged pit, almost human height deep, and a sharp pain pierced his leg like an electric shock. In the next flash of lightning, he saw Jack bending over the pit, towering above him like a judge over a criminal. Raindrops streamed down his face like the fake tears of a crocodile. You know what's most disgusting about all this? The Special Forces soldier spoke in the same frighteningly calm tone of a man discussing the weather. Not that you slept with my wife, not even that she cheated on me when I was most vulnerable, but that you turned it into a game, into a dirty entertainment for your perverted souls. Each time you did it in my house, thinking I couldn't see or hear anything. It turned you on even more, right? As if I were part of your dirty fantasy. Raphael writhed in pain, nursing his broken leg, bent at an angle that nature never intended for human limbs. Somewhere up above, on the porch, Sophia was sobbing, her wails merging with the thunder in a cacophony of despair. Now listen to me very carefully. Jack sat on the edge of the pit like a businessman on the edge of a desk during important negotiations. You will leave the country, forever, if I ever find out you've stayed, if I ever see you within 1,000 miles of this house. He grinned with the warmth of a desert noon. You know, Grandpa taught me a couple of techniques from Iraq. Turns out his stories weren't so delirious after all, especially those concerning prisoner interrogations. The storm raged over the house, as if nature itself was applauding this tragicomedy. And in the basement, in a puddle of water with a sharp smell, lay a charred toaster, the only innocent victim of this night, a faithful soldier who died in the performance of his last mission and posthumously earned a Purple Heart made of foil. Chapter 6, Old School. The police arrived at the scene 22 minutes after calls from neighbors who had heard screams more reminiscent of a wildlife documentary. The soaking wet patrol officers discovered a scene worthy of a surrealistic film. A Brazilian student with a broken leg in a picturesque pit in the backyard. A sobbing woman on the porch wrapped in a blanket like a burrito stuffed with remorse. A partially sighted Special Forces veteran. And his elderly father who for some reason was trying to pay final respects to a charred toaster wrapped in an American flag. Just an ordinary domestic accident, Harvey explained to the surprised policeman, suddenly transforming from a lunatic old man into a collected and rational person, like an actor removing his mask after a performance. The young man lost his orientation in the darkness and fell into a pit that I dug to collect rainwater, an old habit from Iraq. There we always prepared for drought. The detective who arrived at the scene happened to be an Afghanistan veteran. One look at the perfectly executed trap, exactly 1.5 human heights deep, with perfectly vertical walls and masterfully camouflaged top, and he understood everything without unnecessary words. In his official report appeared the laconic line, accident under adverse weather conditions and power outage. A week later, Raphael was deported back to Brazil. Unexpectedly, substantial administrative violations were discovered in his student visa. Perhaps this was somehow connected to the 2-hour conversation that took place between Harvey and his old army buddy, who had worked his way up to deputy chief of the immigration service, during which they discussed exclusively fishing, weather, and why some foreigners should not linger in the hospitable United States. Sophia disappeared the day after the incident, packing her things in record time as if being chased by a pack of wolves. She left a note that could have claimed the prize for the briefest divorce letter in human history. Sorry, I'm not even worth these words, but sorry. The divorce process proceeded faster than baking a pie, without scandals and mutual accusations. She waived all property claims and, as neighbors whispered, went somewhere to Alaska, as if wanting to be as far as possible from the site of her disgrace. A month later, Jack and Harvey sat on the porch, watching the sunset spread across the sky like a colorful cocktail. Jack's vision improved day by day. Now he could distinguish not only light and shadows, but also colors, outlines of objects, even read large print on supermarket packages. You know, son, Harvey twirled a new banana in his hands, which he now used as a microphone without any pretense, just out of habit. I need to confess something to you, man to man. That you never suffered from senile dementia, Jack smiled. I figured that out the night you caused the short circuit with the precision of a Swiss watch. Too professional in your calculations for someone who supposedly can't tell a toaster from a radio station. The old man snorted like a satisfied cat. In Fallujah, they taught us, the best disguise is one the enemy believes even after the fifth check. They thought I was out of my mind, and they lost their vigilance like a sentry dozing at his post. And the toaster. Jack nodded toward the brand new appliance peacefully standing on the kitchen table, visible through the open window. Was that also part of the grand plan, or were you really talking to kitchen appliances? Don't talk nonsense, Harvey snorted with the indignation of a man suspected of something absurd. Private Toaster was a real war hero, fell in the line of duty, defending the family's honor. This recruit isn't fit to polish his buttons, always burns on one side and undercooks on the other. No military discipline in modern technology. They were silent, watching the sun set, painting the sky in all shades of red and orange, as if an invisible artist was testing a new palette. Somewhere in the distance, a car honked, and this sound no longer made Harvey dive under the table with a cry of air raid. Everyone to the shelter. You know what's funniest? The old man suddenly said, sipping beer from a bottle. All these tripwires, bells, cans. I really did use such things in Iraq. Only then it wasn't a game, but a matter of life and death, like choosing between decaffeinated and regular coffee for a workaholic. Jack nodded. Will you tell me the real stories without aliens and talking toasters? And Harvey began to tell. Without pretense, without fake insanity, just stories of an old soldier who had seen too much for one lifetime. About night raids, where the darkness was so dense that it seemed you could slice it and serve it with beer instead of chips. About how he learned to distinguish footsteps, rustles, the slightest movements of air, as if he himself had turned into a living radar. About comrades who never returned home, and about those who returned as different people, as if part of their soul had remained in the desert sands. 6 months later, they transformed that very pit into a decorative pond with colorful carp. Jack joked that it was Harvey's idea, to rehabilitate the crime scene, turning the instrument of vengeance into a source of tranquility. In reality, the old man had always dreamed of breeding Japanese koi carp, considering them the most Zen Buddhist of all fish. You'll see, he said, solemnly releasing the first spotted fish into the pond, as if conducting a baptism ceremony. They will be our new sentries. A carp is also a soldier, just underwater, with scales instead of body armor and fins instead of a bayonet. By that time, Jack was already working as an instructor at a rehabilitation center for veterans. His story, about how he lost his sight and then gradually regained it, gave hope to other men maimed by war who thought their lives had ended along with the loss of limbs or organs. But he never told the complete version of events, about his wife's betrayal, about revenge, about the pit in the backyard. Some stories are better left in the past, like dangerous toys that can explode if played with for too long. Every evening, he and his grandfather sat by the pond, fed the colorful carp, and had heart-to-heart talks. About war and peace, about loyalty and betrayal, about darkness and light, about why some beer brands taste better than others, and why baseball is the best game ever invented by mankind. Sometimes the neighbor's cat joined them, the very cat that Harvey had once accused of espionage and subversive activities. You know what the main lesson I took from this whole story is, Harvey said one day, looking at the setting sun. Old techniques always work, always. But the main thing isn't the techniques themselves, but what you use them for. For revenge, and you'll become as empty as a tin can. For protecting what's dear, and you'll sleep soundly, even if the whole world turns into one big combat zone. Jack looked at his grandfather. Now he could see every wrinkle on his face, every scar left by time, war, and life, which sometimes hits harder than any enemy. Thank you, Grandpa, he said quietly. For what? For teaching me to see in the dark, and for returning toasters as a class of military equipment to life. Harvey grinned and with a familiar gesture pulled a new banana from his pocket. This is radio, free pond and surrounding speaking. We transmit the latest news. All carp are on combat duty. The perimeter is under reliable protection. And Comrade Cat has finally received a promotion to the rank of Colonel of Fluffy Intelligence with the award of the For Courage on the Couch Order. And they laughed, now without bitterness, without pretense, without falsity. Just like two people who had found their way from darkness to light, from the past to the future, from betrayal to understanding that real family isn't always those connected to you by marriage ties, but those who will cover your back in a trench under enemy fire.